Boker Tov, Bruchim Habayim, Morai Rabotai, to another edition of our weekly Shiur on Parashat with the Perush of Zera Shimshon. Today's Shiur, I need help with this, has been dedicated for Refuah Shalema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid. We should have a full recovery, Refuah Shalema, Amen. Also has been dedicated for Zera Shel Kayama, for Tila Bracha Bat Afsanem, and Yonatan ben Faridem, Devorah Bat Rachel, and Binyamin ben Reuven, Ariel Yochai ben Afsaneh, and Elinor Bat Tzara, Eldad ben Mahnaz, and Miriam, together with Bracha Bat Marcel Dina, that should be blessed with Zera Shel Kayama, Amen. And also for Tzchut of Shiduchim, Zivug Nae for Sarah Bat Pnina, Sarah Bat Rosi, Ezra ben Marcelina, Yisrael ben Sarah, Orel Bat Sarah, Orael Bat Sarah, and Devorah Bat Ronit, Nava Tehila, that Bezrat Hashem, they should all be Zochev, Livnot Bait Ne'eman B'Yisrael, Amen. So we are doing Parashat Mishpatim, and we're going to learn together Ot Tet, the 9th essay that Rabbeinu Shimshon Nachmani writes, a beautiful, beautiful piece discussing something that everyone is challenged with when we talk about mazal. A person has a good mazal, doesn't have a good mazal. Do Jews even have mazal? Well, the Gemara says we don't have mazal. And then the Gemara says, Hakol talui b'mazal, afilu sefer Torah shebe'echal. So we're clearly talking about Jews over there. So how we draw the line, and this really also borders on another subject of free will versus destiny. Can my free will trump my destiny? Can my free will trump your destiny? Can a person decide to kill or damage somebody else that is not meant to be? The Tosafot in the 9th parak of Baba Batra discussed this. A lot of literature written about this from already the time of the Gaonim, Rabbeinu Hananel, and so on and so forth. There is a very interesting pasuk in this week's parasha that seems to talk about this, and it will become very interesting immediately as soon as you start studying this pasuk. So of course Parashat Mishpatim is filled with mitzvot, dozens and dozens of mitzvot, and in Perek Chav Gimel, pasuk Chav He and Chav Vav, the Torah writes that if you serve Hashem and do the mitzvot, va'avatem et Hashem Elokechem, if you serve Hashem, uberach et lachmecha ve'et memecha, Hashem will bless your water and your bread, your food will be blessed, your parnasa would be booming, would be good. Va'asiroti mahala miqirbecha, and Hashem says, I will take sickness away from you. Lo tiyeh meshakla va'akara ba'artzecha, you will not have any woman that is akara, that's barren, cannot have children, or will bury children, chas v'shalom, will never have any of that. And et mispar yamecha amaleh, I will fill your days, give you longevity. So those 3/4 items that are mentioned over here seem to be identical with the 3 things that the Gemara says at the end of Masechet Moed Katan, and Daf Kafchet Amud Aleph. The Gemara says that Bane Chaye Umezoni, children, longevity, life, and Parnasa, Lo B'Zchuta Talya Milta. It's not dependent on zchuyot of what you do, Ela B'Mazala Talya Milta. They are dependent on your mazal. You either have a good mazal or you don't have a good mazal. You can't really change it. It is what it is. Learn to live with it. That's what the Gemara seems to say. Again, the language of the Gemara is Bani chaye umezoni, children, life, and parnasa, lo b'zchuta talya milta, which seems to say it does not matter what you do, even if you accumulate zchuyot, It does not change it. There is a decree. Be mazala talia milta. It's your mazal. It's what has been decreed on you from the beginning, like the Gemara says in Masechet Sotah, Daf Bet, when a child, even before they are formed in the uterus, at the time of conception, and some of it even before. Arba'im yom kodem yetzirat havelad. However, you explain that at the time of already there is a malach that this is taken in front of it and it's judged. Is it going to be ashir? Is it going to be ani? Tall, short, ugly, beautiful? All of those things are decreed. So these three items, at the very least, are not changeable, seems to say the Gemara. Now, there is another Gemara. The Gemara says in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Kuf Nun Vav Amud Aleph, 156a, the Gemara there says, talks about this as well, because there the Gemara says, the general concept of the Gemara, and he does not bring this, the general concept of the Gemara is, Gemara there says, En mazal Yisrael. Jews don't have mazal. How do we know? Because Avraham Avinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, he took him above the Kochavim. He tells Avraham Avinu, look down at the stars. And Rashi actually brings this. He says, you're above the stars. You're above the constellations and the stargazing and mazalot and all those things. Those are for the rest of humanity. For Jews, you could change everything anytime, anyway. Things are malleable. You could change them. En mazal Yisrael. So the Gemara says. So Tosafot there are bothered with this Gemara. I say, wait a second. For those who have not forgotten the last pages of Masechet Moed Katan, we got a problem over here. On one hand, you tell me that certain things are not changeable. Now you're telling me we don't even have mazal. So which one is it? And the Tosafot say, it really is not a stira. These things are much harder to change. Like the Gemara says there in Sotah, that kashe zivugan ki kriyat yamsuf, very much things that we have been dealing with in Parashiot that we are learning, that the parnasa and zivug are difficult, like kriyat yamsuf. They're not simple to change. So says the Gemara, therefore those three things are not changeable. And Tosafot says when the Gemara says it's not changeable, it means normal things would not change it. Normal zchuyot, you do a mitzvah here, a mitzvah there, you keep them here, that's not going to change it. It's not going to cut it. But with a zchut gadol, with a tremendous merit, when you do something really big, that could even sway and change these three items. The Gemara says, La b'zchuta talia milta. In other words, the Tosafot say the Gemara in Shabbat is the primary rule. The primary rule is, when you talk about the Jews, anything could happen. Anything could happen. The Gemara in Moed Katan is saying, there are things that are much harder, so much harder than almost you could say that's not talui and zchuyot. It's fully mazal. But even those you could change. What's the example of this, by the way? Which he doesn't bring. The example of this is, like the Gemara says, in Masechet Brachot Daf Yud. The Gemara talks about a prophecy delivered directly from Yeshaya Navi to Melech Yisrael, to Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chizkiyahu HaMelech did something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was very unhappy with. He decided that he's not going to get married, for good reasons, because he saw in Ruach HaKodesh that he's not going to have children that are going to be good children. He saw that his children are going to be Reshayim. So he said, well, I'm going to get married to bring Reshayim to this. I'm not getting married. I'm not getting married. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was unhappy with her, because that's none of your business. You have to do the mitzvot. And the rest is up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like Yeshaya told him, why are you putting your nose, sticking your nose into the covered and secret things of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You have to do what you have to do. The rest, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu run his world. Indeed, when he did get married, his children were tremendous Reshaim, right? His children were not. Menashe was one of the greatest Reshaim that the history of the world has ever seen. But Hashem was upset with him. And the punishment came declared by Yeshaya Navi, Ki met ata velo tichye. You will die. He was sick already on deathbed. And he came to declare to him that this is your last sickness, you're dying from this. It's a gezerah from Hashem. Now, what would you do if the Navi Yeshayahu, came to you and said, Tzav el betecha, write your will. That's what I told him. Ki met ata velo tichye. This is it. It's happening in real time. What would you do? What would you do? You would do tshuva. It says it's happening. Right? It didn't say do tshuva, it says it's happening. You know what he did? He kicked him out of his palace. Right? Figuratively. He says, Ben Amos! He doesn't even call him Yeshaya. He says, Ben Amos, the son of Amos, Kaleh nevuatcha, finish your nevuah and chazak baruch. Get out of my palace. Mekubalani.
He told him first, maybe if my son will marry your daughter, together we'll have a schus, that would change.
Yeah, of course. He says, no, that's afterwards. He says to him, he says to him, get out of my palace. Mekubalani mi be'avi abba. I have a tradition from my great-grand Zaidi, David HaMelech, the lineage of David HaMelech. Afilu cheref hadam munachat al savaro shel adam al yimna atzmo min ha'achamim. Even if you have a sharp sword laying on your neck, you should not stop from tefillah. And he kicks him out. He turns his face to the wall. Vayasev Chizkiyahu et panav el hakir, and he starts davening like he had never davened before. And what happens? Sure enough, miraculously, we're not discussing what happened in this story, exactly the details, but 15 years were added to his life. And then he says to Yeshaya, maybe my zchut and your zchut, I'm going to marry your daughter. Maybe, now that I accepted to get married, maybe if you give your daughter to me, you have zchuyot, I have zchuyot, maybe it will help. And sure enough, he marries the daughter of Yeshaya Navi. And what happens? Well, on surface level, nothing really changed. Maybe you could say Menashe at the end did tshuva, but really, how Yeshaya Navi was killed? How he died? He was killed by his own grandson. Menashe, this child, killed his own sod alive, his own grandfather. But at the same time, the fate of Chizkiyahu was changed, even though that Banechayu Mazoni, the Masala Talia Milta, it was changed. Right? Now, this really involves another Gemara in Masechet Yevamot, Daf Nun Amud Aleph as well, because the Gemara there talks about whether or not when a person has zchuyot, they add to his life, or they subtract from his life if he doesn't have zchuyot, which we're going to discuss just in a moment. But first, Rabbeinu Shimshon ben Nachman over here says the following. Yesh lomar. He brings this whole thing and says, well, wait, it seems like with zchuyot you could change it, right? Over here is not saying, the pasuk is not saying if you have a zechut gadol, if you have a massive merit, it says keep the mitzvot and I'll give you life. I'll change, I'll give you parnasa, I'll give you children, you won't have any barren people. Doesn't say zechut gadol, it's just talking about keeping the mitzvot. Keep the mitzvot and I'll take care of you. So that's a bomb question. You're telling me all this gemarot that nothing could change it. Then you tell me the Tosafot in Masechet Shabbat that, well, you could, but it's very hard. It's almost impossible. You need a massive zechut. Read the pasuk. The pasuk in Parashat Mishpatim says, you do the mitzvot, I'll provide you all these three things. Not talking about massive zechut. Keep the Torah. Normal Yid, a regular Jew. So says the Zera Shimshon, This is talking about another realm of blessing, of bracha, which most people take for granted. And that is, we think of parnasah, someone that has a lot of money in the bank. We think of parnasah in the olden day, someone that had tremendous amount of wheat or in produce and so on. Not necessarily so. The pasuk says, "Berach et lachmecha ve'et memecha." The same lechem that you have, it could be blessed. Like Rashi brings this, by the way, on Chumash. When we talk about the laws of Shvi'it, the sabbatical year, it says, if you ask, what are we going to eat? If you're not going to work, we're not going to be planting and plowing and working and harvesting. So what's going to be? Then you have silos and fridges and freezers. Then you have that. If you didn't have produce for a year and a half, it is really, until you get the next year. And if it is Shenat HaYovel, then it's simply understanding it is 2 years and a half. Because you're not working the 49th year, which is a Shemitah, and the 50th year, which is Yovel. Right? So you have 2 Shemitahs back to back, according to conventional understanding. So then, you're really in trouble. What are we going to eat? And says the Torah, don't worry about it. V'tziviti et birchati, I am going to command my blessing in the 6th year, and it will produce double. Right? Produce double. And Rashi already brings a question of 2 places how to read. It says, for some people it would be like this. For some people it will be mitbarech b'me'av. It will be blessed in his stomach. That means you could have a little bit and eat it, and you'll be satiated, and you'll have even what to save for later. And says the Zera Shimshon, that is a type of blessing that exists in life. You could have the same lechem and eat it and be hungry and starving, and you could have the same thing with blessing in it, that you will eat it and you will be satiated and full, and you'll have even motarot, you will have extras for later. So it says, Hashem is not saying I'm giving you more. I'm going to send blessing into what you have, that you will live like a mensch. You will be full and you'll be completely satisfied and satiated and good. And says the Zera Shimshon, V'chen nami et mispar yamecha amale. Same is with the bracha of et mispar yamecha amale. What does that mean? I'll give you longevity. It means that your mazal is not going to change. You're not going to have more years, but also I'm not going to take away from your years. Why would you think that you're going to take away? Because of that Gemara that I just mentioned a minute ago. The Gemara in Yevamot has a machloket between Tanaim, which he doesn't bring here, as machloket Rabbi Akiva and Chachamim. Right? And it's actually speaking about this pasuk. Et mispar yamecha amaleh, says the Gemara, page 58, that if you, Rabbi Akiva says, if you are zoche, if you merit, then Hashem is going to, we're talking about shenot dor, a person's years that have been set for him, he's going to live 120 years. If you have zchuyot, Hashem will fill in, give you 120 years. If not, if you don't have zchuyot, Hashem is going to knock out a few years. Right? We learn about Yosef HaTzadik. He was supposed to live 120, but he heard 10 times, 5 times translated, Avdecha Avinu, your servant, our father. That's respectful for you to hear it and not stop them from saying it. 10 years was knocked out. Yaakov Avinu complained. There goes 33 years knocked off. Right? The amount of words that him and Paro spoke in those sentences. So you could lose some of it, right? But if you have zchuyot, it will be filled. Chachamim say no, it could even be better. If you have zchuyot, it will be added to your years even. If not, it will be taken away. That's what they say. Right? So that's the machlok in the Gemara there. So he is playing with both both of these shitot, without telling us that this is two different things, that if a person has zchuyot, et mispar yamecha, it says Hashem will take away. So it says Hashem is not going to add to your years, like the Chachamim say, if you don't have zchuyot, but He's also not going to take away. Right? So that's when we say et mispar yamecha amale, that's what it means. So it says the Zera Shimshon, why would He take away? If I don't have zchuyot, so I'm not a big tzaddik, but I'm not a rasha either, I'm a regular Jew. Why would He take away from my years? And says the Zera Shimshon, because you have all kinds of incidences that a person could lose their zchuyot. For instance, a person could eat the wrong things, b'shogeg even, right? That they are unhealthy. Or you could go and put yourself into makom sakana. A person could be passing through a danger, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs zchuyot to save them. Right? So for that, you don't have zchut gadol, but if you keep the mitzvot, Hashem says, I'll protect you. Like the Gemara talks about this in 4 places in Shas, in Psachim Daf Chet, for instance, Gemara says it. Gemara in Sotah Daf Chaf Aleph talks about the fact that additional to regular mitzvot, the Torah is magna umatzla, it's protection for a person, and so on, right? So that's what it's talking about, that I'm not going to let dangers of the world affect you to take away from that life that I have set for you to have. I personally would say something even much more simple than the Zera Shimshon. I'm not sure why he doesn't say that. When it said, when the pasuk says, "Et mispar yamecha amaleh," what does it mean? Look, translation, simple translation. Well, I fill up your days. Yamecha. I would say the same thing that he said before. The same amount of years could be blessed years. Like we say by Avraham Avinu, Avraham Zaken, Ba Bayamim, that every day of his life was filled. He had it. You find people who in 40 years, they accomplish things that people in 120 twice they cannot accomplish. When a person's life is blessed, Hashem says, I take away the sicknesses from you. I take away the agonies from you. I'll make it such that your days will be filled with bracha in such way that you could accomplish life in the same amount of years. I don't have to give you more years, but I'll fill them up in a way that you will accomplish so much that you won't even believe it yourself. A person that, goes through life without being agonized, without being sick, without people bothering him, a quality of life versus quantity of years. And that would be a very simple way of understanding, but he goes, again, a little bit more of a sophisticated way of understanding it based on the Gemara in Yevamot that we just mentioned.
Is there a concept that Hashem with chesed takes away years? Like, was it Enoch, or where you're...
We find that, yes, by even Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was taken away 5 years earlier, and that was with chesed because he should not see Esav rather go off the path 5 years earlier, right? So you have that, but again, that becomes, I was thinking of mentioning that it's more complicated, so that we'll leave it for a different talk. And then he says, well, the banim is a little bit of a complicated thing, because it says you're not going to have meshakla va'akara. You're not going to have barren people. No one's going to be akara. So how do you understand that? So on that he says, well, this really is zchut gadol. And even though that the pasuk over here seems to say that even without a zchut gadol, even without a great merit, you could have children even against your mazal, he says you have to pay close attention to the pasuk, because it says that I'll give you the children on be'artzecha, right? In your land, in Eretz Yisrael, it's referring to, right? Now, the Gemara says, why would a mazal of a person change by banim if you don't have the mazal for it and you don't have a great zchut, right? ומכאן נראה שמשנה המזל וקשה, למה דווקא בזל? But in this one, the other two we said it's not going to change it, it's just going to be the quality, it's going to be... But this one, there's no way around it. Hashem is going to give you children, it seems like, even if you don't have zchut gadol and you don't have the mazal for it. Right? So it says... now, there's actually a Gemara. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says, he brings this, but this is Gemara in Daf Tet Zayin Amud Bet of Masechet Rosh Hashanah. He says, Shloshat dvarim mekar'in gzar dino shel adam. It's really in our girsa is arba'a dvarim, the Gemara says. So it's either a mistake or the Yad Yosef and En Yaakov, he actually brings a girsa like this, Shlosha. So maybe Zera Shimshon had that girsa. But there are 4 things that they could change a person's mazal. Right? It's $1 million recipe. Right? You ready? Right? The 4 things are, what are they? They are tzedakah, first and foremost. Tzedakah, tatzil mimavet, tzedakah changes the mazal. The Gemara says that Daniel HaNavi gave a etzah to Nebuchadnezzar, right, to save himself from death, from imminent death, by giving tzedakah to push it back. Right? Hashem was upset with him to do that. But tzedakah works even for goyim, it seems like. Tze'aka, screaming in tefillah to Hashem from the bottom of your heart, that changes it. Shinui Hashem, changing your name. Veshinui Maaseh, changing your deeds. When a person says, I'm going to now go to Amud Yomi every day. I'm going to learn Torah every day. I'm going to go to Shiur. I'm going to finish Shas. I'm going to start keeping things that I don't keep, and I know I should be keep. Shinui Maaseh changes the mazal of a person. Right? And then the Gemara says, there are those who say, even Shinui Makom. That even if you change your way, and that is actually not having children. Avraham Avinu goes to, Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha, go. He says, Kan yata zoche lebanim. Here, you won't have children. Go there, you'll have children. Right? So it says, the Zera Shimshon, what is this exactly? How does this work? How does this work? So it's midah keneged midah. It's a very creative, nice way of putting it. It says midah keneged midah. Because living in Eretz Yisrael is living with the Shekhinah. Like the Gemara says in Masechet Ketuvot, in the 13th parak of Masechet Ketuvot, Daf Kuf Yud and Kuf Yud Aleph, the Gemara says, Kol adar bechutz la'aretz domeh lemi she'en lo eloka. If you live in Chutz La'aretz, is like a person that doesn't have a God. Gemara there says, better to live in a city full of goyim in Eretz Yisrael than live in a city full of Jews in Chutz La'aretz. Please do not learn from this, because this is complicated. The Gemara says, just like it's asur to go from Eretz Yisrael out to Bavel, it's asur to go out from Bavel somewhere else. It really depends on a person. Many people have with Tmimut. And this is actually a Gemara that is the original Sochnut and the anti-religion Zionism used this to destroy the religious communities of the Sfaradim. This caused tremendous uproar. And many people who hate with passion the Zionism is because of this, because they, and there are many documentaries about this. Now everything is parav to some extent. You have religious Zionism, but originally they actually would bring them. They would quote this Gemara to them that you come here, you don't need to do. It's as if you did all the mitzvot. You come here, you don't need peot anymore. You don't need to keep Shabbat. They will take their kids away from them, send them to kibbutzes that they were mehalel Yom Kippur, and they will have like a final football game with treif barbecue on Yom Kippur. That's how that's a lot of history there. But they used this Gemara in Ketuvot. So I'm telling you, don't get too excited about this. Everyone has to ask their competent Moreh Hora'ah if they want to make decisions of moving and so on and so forth. But the Gemara is there. Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a Pnei Yeshua, how to understand this. The Me'irim Betabechira explains this. The Maharsha, there's a lot to say, a lot. You can give a whole shiur on just that Gemara of what exactly is the understanding. But Eretz Yisrael is directly under HaKadosh Baruch Hu's providence, right? And therefore, it's a level of Hashra'at HaShechina. But guess what else causes Hashrat Shechina? There's one more thing the Gemara tells us that causes Hashrat Shechina, and that is a person that's osek bepriya v'riva. The Gemara says in Masechet Yevamot, Daf Samech Dalet, that a person that is busy, it's not busy with priya v'riva, does not get married. We spoke earlier on about Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Kol mi she'eno osek bepriya v'riva, gorem lashchina shetistalek mi-Yisrael. He causes the Shechina to be removed from Am Yisrael. So therefore, when you go to Eretz Yisrael, you're moser nefesh to go to Eretz Yisrael because you want to live with Shechina. Midah keneged midah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you children, which also bring Shechina to Klal Yisrael for the continuity of that. So that's how it would work. So he basically now explained, put together all of these things, the ambiguous gemarot that we have. Do we have mazal? Do we not have mazal? Now we have like a proper understanding that really, if it's chut gadol, when a person does great things, especially when things are difficult to keep a certain mitzvah, and you go breaking the nature, doing something, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also would break the nature, right, for you, and change that decree and give you children, give you parnasa, give you all those things that are lav b'zchuta talya milta, like a full life extension on a lease of life and so on. That's the zchut gadol. But if a person keeps the mitzvot even without zchut gadol, just a dedication to keeping of the mitzvot, that gives you quality of life. It gives you quality of children. It will certainly give you quality of parnasa. The person will have a calm, satisfied life, which is a tremendous, tremendous thing. And he, at the end, he throws in one little thing also. We'll end with this. He says, by mezonot, he says, when I give you parnasa, right? He also says, v'asiroti mahala mikirbecha. I'll take the sicknesses away. So Zera Shimshon says, why do you have to put that bracha of not having any ailments and sicknesses inside the general bracha of parnasa and food? Says the Zera Shimshon, because a lot of the sicknesses come from not eating healthy. It's just very interesting. He puts this in. He says, Talui b'mezonot. The Gemara says this in Baba Kama, Gemara in Sadi Bet Amud Bet. He says, Pat shacharit. If you eat healthy, just in the morning, have a proper seudah in the morning, healthy stuff, takes away hasiroti machala mikirbecha. What's gimatria machala? 83. The Gemara there says, it takes 83 different sicknesses from a person for eating correctly. The Rambam writes in the beginning of Hilchot Deot, he says, don't eat these things. These are, some of the things that everyone likes to eat, actually. He says, these are sama mavit. These are bad things, bad for your health. And eat these things that are healthy. And Rambam, sort of like, not characteristically of his, he guarantees that if you listen to everything I said in this parak, you will have a long, healthy life. So, says the Zera Shimshon, the Torah is telling you, in a very quick hint, that the health of a person very much depends on what he eats and how he lives his life in that way. Bezrat Hashem will continue our shiur in the weeks to come. Hazaku Baruch.